Tonight we have a former Deputy Senate President and a member of the Technical Committee on the Electoral Act and a member of the Senate Committee on INEC, Senator Ekweremadu, with a lot of experience in issues like this. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, former Senate President, Deputy Senate President, for joining us tonight. Let me begin the conversation because a lot of Nigerians will be expecting some good news because this is not the first time we're trying to fix our electoral laws. Our elections are far from what we want it to be. There are efforts in making it better. But from the amendments that have been done so far, I understand that there is a retreat ongoing in Abuja with some of your colleagues. What would you say would make Nigerians happy the most in these amendments?
Thank you, Sean. I'd like to say good evening to Nigerians. And I'd like to reassure our people that the National Assembly is committed to a better electoral management and that we are prepared to lay the necessary legislative structure that will ensure a proper electoral system. Our Electoral Act has been work in progress. In 2008, we started a process aimed at giving Nigerians the best possible electoral process. So giving rise to the 2000 Electoral Act, which has been in operation since then, which is what we are using presently. But we believe that we can always improve on what we have. And so in 2015, there was an amendment that gave the INEC an option to use electronic means to conduct election. And now we intend to improve further our Electoral Act in a number of areas. One of the major problems we have with our Electoral Act is the issue of timing and timelines. We've tried to deal with those issues in terms of the time frame within which to file petitions for after elections, how the elections, the petition will be concluded within sufficient time, and then the highest court to deal with different matters probably arising from National Assembly or State Assembly elections, which must end at the Court of Appeal, and then the President and the governors end at the Supreme Court. And then they have 180 days to deal with those at the election tribunals, and then 60 days at the appeal. We've also provided timelines to deal with the issue of pre-election matters, same as the post-election matters. Now, we're looking at some other timelines. We discovered that one of the major problems INEC face is the issue of time within which to conduct a very credible election. Because under the Electoral Act, the present Electoral Act, the parties are required to send the names of their candidates not later than 60 days before the election, which is just barely 2 months. So this puts INEC under severe pressure. And so most times you see a mix-up, you see materials meant for Sokoto being sent to Rivers State and vice versa. And now, so what we're trying to do is to give INEC sufficient time to prepare. And we are borrowing from the best examples and we believe that this will work for us. In Ghana, for instance, the primaries for candidates takes place between a year, 6 months, and 1 year. If the government, the party that is in power, usually they do their primaries a year before the election. And if those that are out of power, the opposition, they do their primaries a year, 6 months before the election. So this gives the election management body sufficient time to process the candidates, print the materials, and then, of course, get ready for the election. And there are pre-election issues that determine mostly before the election. It's not so in Nigeria. So what we've tried to do now is to propose to our colleagues sufficient timelines for these things to take place. We are hoping that if they accept our proposals, the primaries will take place much, much earlier in the 2003 election than it used to be. We are hoping that if they accept our proposal, that the candidates will march and be named sent to the election management body, INEC, not less than 180 days before the election. So that means that sometime in July next year, the candidate's name would have been sent to the INEC.
All right.
And then, of course, the primaries will take place before that. Remember that the primaries cannot take place unless the INEC has fixed date for the election. So we are now saying that INEC should now call for the election not later than 360 days before the election.
Oh.
So this means that about February next year, INEC would have proposed for the election, and then primaries will start. So we're hoping that primaries will start sufficiently early, and then the candidates will be known, and then NEC will have enough time to process them. And if there are pre-election matters, they'll be determined before the election.
All right. So there is a highlight of some of what Nigerians are yearning for. A lot of Nigerians are wondering that when they vote, their votes may not count. When there are elections, the real results are not out. So let me pick some of the top issues on the front burner as far as some Nigerians are concerned. Maybe the former DSP can help us tackle them quickly on the show within the frame of time that we have. One of it is the issue of the independence of INEC. In this amendment, will INEC be dependent in some way that will not have, because it's not only financial dependence that people are talking about, it's also the nomination and the appointing issue, the appointer of INEC board and INEC chair.
Well, thank you so much. Well, there must be a process to appoint those who manage our electoral process. I don't think we have a problem with that. In the past, the Constitution provided that for you to be a member of the Independent National Electoral Commission, you must also qualify to be a member of House of Representatives. An implication, therefore, is that you must be a member of a political party. Because for you to be elected into the House of Representatives, you must be a member of a political party. We amended that part of the Constitution, removing that aspect to ensure that those who manage our elections are not members of any political party. So that have secured that independence. We've also given them sufficient independence in the management of their finances, because their money now, through that amendment in the Constitution, is now in the first line charge. So they are not dependent on any person, and they don't take instruction from any person based on the amendment we've made in the Constitution in the past. So giving them sufficient independence in terms of managing the resources and also taking some administrative decisions. But remember that all this depends on those who are managing it, for them to take advantage of those provisions of the Constitution. And that's exactly why we look for credible people to be chairman and members of the Independent Electoral Commission. And of course, the other issue you raised is the credibility of the election. They can be assured through the use of technology in conducting our elections. Now, in 2015, as I did mention earlier, we amended the Constitution, the Electoral Act, to give the INEC an option to use the electronic means. They've not really tried that, but I heard that they intend to do that in a number of elections. But in the one we are working on now, we want to take it a step further by saying that you don't just conduct the elections through electronic means, but importantly, we also need to transmit it through electronic means. Because most of the trouble we have with our elections, the result, happens between the polling booth and where they do the collation. So this needs to be bypassed by using the electronic means of transmission. I was in a day election and it worked. They simply uploaded the result from the polling booths straight to the INEC website, and people can have access to it, and you can monitor the elections as the results as they're coming in. Now, but it wasn't in any part of the Electoral Act or in the Constitution. So what we are looking at now, we intend to bring it into the Electoral Act. I'm hoping that our colleagues will also accept that and pass it into law. If that happens, yes.
All right. So let's take a breather. But when we come back, there are other gray areas. The issue of Electoral Offences Commission. These are issues that INEC cannot just punish any electoral offenders. Where do we go from here? Because a lot of people do electoral offense, but they get away with it. How do we fix that? That's one of the issues I'd like to take up with you when we return from this break. Join us again, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Perhaps some psychologists done the survey to say the reasons why a lot of Nigerians do not want to go and vote on the election day is because they think their votes will not count. And so Nigerian lawmakers are making efforts in ensuring that they fix the gray areas in our law to ensure sanity in our elections. So we're having a conversation with the former Deputy Senate President and a member of the Technical Committee on Electoral Act and member Senate Committee on INEC, Senator Ekweremadu is in our Abuja studio. Before I come, Senator, before I come onto the issue of the Electoral Offences Commission, one area that has caused a lot of agitations amongst Nigerian youth is the exorbitant rate of nomination forms. It scared a lot of people away. Some political parties charge as much as 25 million, 20 million for nomination form when you're not even guaranteed that you're going to pick the ticket of the party. Is there an amendment in that favor? To favor that, rather?
Well, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is very firm about the issue of discrimination. So we need to find an acceptable way of accommodating our youth and our women. And in the past, we've reduced the number of years, age limit that qualifies young people to run for election in Nigeria, which we call the not too young to run bill, which we eventually passed and is part and parcel of our Constitution. Now, that has not really achieved the noble aim of getting our youth involved in politics of Nigeria. Of course, I agree with you that the cost of election and electioneering is so high that most times our women and our youth who would have otherwise contributed to the welfare and well-being of Nigeria are completely cut off the electoral process or the political process. My view is that we need to change the present system of the first past the post, which we are practicing, in which people run elections by their own teams and then try to vie to represent various constituencies. And of course, migrate into what is happening in most countries of the world, which is called proportional representation. That way, the electoral process will now encourage political parties to run elections on their own. And then before they run these elections, they'll set a list of proposed members of the parliament to an independent electoral commission. And this list will include women, it will include young people, it will also include people with disabilities. And then when you win the election, and you've won maybe say 60% of the votes, that party is entitled to 60% of the seats in the parliament. And this 60% will be constituted from that list earlier submitted, which will now include the women, the young people, and people with disability, and other interest groups. In that way, you don't need to go and worry yourself about looking for money to run for election or how to win your elections. All you need to do is to make sure that the political party you are supporting wins the election, and then in that way, the women gets involved, the young people get involved. And that's why when you go to South Africa, Central Africa, and some parts of Europe, you see most women, a lot of women in their parliament. It's because they are practicing what we call proportional representation. But as long as everybody is running an election on the strength of their finances or their contacts and all of that, we're going to have problem getting young people and women sufficiently in the parliament.
All right, because I need to move into several other issues within the time frame that we have. So Section 87, which talked about the issue of the nomination and the cost of it, and Section 31, which talks about the participation and inclusion issue of women, youth, and persons living with disabilities. Are you giving any assurances that those areas are being amended effectively? Well,
of course, sufficiently, we've done a lot in that regard. Section 87 deals with the issue of party primaries. I recall that in 2010 Act, before that was signed to law, our earlier proposal was that all the primaries will take place, will be by direct primaries, where all the members of the political party vote for their candidates. Now, we discovered that it's going to be difficult because the integrity of the registers of most parties cannot be guaranteed. And so what we did was to create an option and say parties can decide to use direct primaries or indirect primaries. So, and then, of course, this is what the Section 87 provides for. But we're going to expand the frontiers of Section 87 to make more direct and more specific amendments that will accommodate various interests and views regarding the issue of primaries, to make sure that, because we need to get the primaries right so that the main election itself will be less contentious. So that's what we're trying to do with Section 87. Otherwise, we've made sufficient provisions in Section 87. In fact, we went as far as saying that no court can stop the issue of the primaries halfway through any kind of injunction. So we try to protect the integrity of the electoral process, especially the primaries, ahead of the main election in Section 87.
Perhaps let's anchor on this note, and I'd like you to really let Nigerians know, because some of your colleagues and some of the colleagues of yours who have left the Senate said, look, if you do not deal with the issue of the Electoral Offences Commission, the whole exercise is a joke. I'd like to ask you if that has been dealt with, because in the Lemu report, and the Justice Ruwais report, these are clearly stated that we need an Electoral Offences Commission. But I'd like to also clarify, I understand that some senators are opposing the inclusion of electronic transfer of results into the Electoral Act. And that's a major problem that you face in the technical committee. Will that see the light of day? And where are we on the Electoral Offences Commission?
Well, this is a double-barrel question. On the issue of the electronic transmission, we're able to agree amongst ourselves in the technical committee that it has to be included in Section 52. And because of some various amendments, it may not be 52 exactly by the time it comes out. Maybe I think it may be Section 50 or thereabout, or 51 now. So that's been accepted at technical level. So right now we are having a retreat of the Joint Committee of the Senate and the House. I just took permission to be here. I'm returning to that place. So we are taking it gradually. And I believe that we'll be able to convince our colleagues in both houses to accept the issue of the electronic transmission of results, because it's key in all of this. Because unless we transmit the results by electronics means, we'll continue to have problem of alteration of results between the polling centers and the collection centers, which is exactly the major problem we have. So, but I'm sure that our colleagues will accept that proposal, because in the best interest of our country and the best interest of our electoral process. Something similar to it was tried in Edo State, and it worked. And now they're trying to improve it in such a way that once you start voting, you can monitor the results. So the technology has improved so much that just like the card technology, you can see the result as people are voting. So that at the end of the voting, it will take you just less than 1 hour for you to know who had won, and then it will be transparent and sufficiently to those who had lost that they won't even worry themselves going to election tribunal. So that answers your question about the issue of electronic transmission. So we believe that it will be sufficiently settled by this act, and Nigerians will be happy that we've done exactly what they want us to do.
Senator Ekweremadu, we are obviously out of time. I hope that you can do that for us in 10 seconds.
Something briefly.
All right, great.
Yeah, the other issue is the issue of the Electoral Offences Act. We're not there in National Assembly for ourselves, we're there for Nigerians. Nigerians want an Electoral Offences Commission. We have a bill, in this National Assembly on that. And as soon as we are done with this issue of the Electoral Act, we are going to focus on that. So we look at it as much as possible to satisfy the union of our Nigerians. But remember that we don't hope or believe that we'll continue to commit electoral offenses in Nigeria. We're hoping and looking forward to a day where our elections will be sufficiently clean, that there will be no issue of offenses, there will be no issue of challenging elections. It will be so transparent and acceptable to everyone. Because Nigeria is one of the few countries in the world we are still talking about electoral offenses, we are still talking about challenging elections after the conduct of the election. So I think that our major issue now is to change our attitude in some of these things to ensure that there are absolutely no need for some of these things. But as long as they're existing, we need to rise up to the challenge and then meet the demands and expectations of Nigerians on how to deal with them.
All right. Former Deputy Senate President and a member of the Technical Committee on the Electoral Amendment and a member of the Senate Committee on INEC, Senator Ekweremadu. It's a pleasure seeing you again and having you on the show to clarify some of these issues. Thank you so much indeed for coming.
Thank you, sir.
Well, that's our show for today, everyone. Many thanks for watching. It's Friday. I'm Sean Kimberley. Bye-bye.